There is a house at the southeast corner of Adelaide Street East and Sherbourne Street in present-day Toronto. At this location, William Jarvis, who was an officer with John Graves Simcoe's Queen Rangers, was given land. William Jarvis built a small estate and named it Jarvis House. Originally from Connecticut, he had fled to England after the American Revolution and arrived in Canada with his wife, Hannah, and 3 children. For his service, he had been given a lot in town and a 100-acre park lot. At the time, Sherbourne was known as Caroline Street, and Adelaide was Duke Street. Jarvis House was a 2-story square log house with wooden siding on 2 acres of land. It had 2 barns, a stable, chicken coops, and a root house. There was also quarters for 6 enslaved people owned by the Jarvises. William Jarvis accused 2 of the people he enslaved of stealing from him in his house. When in court, the boy Prince is sent to prison and an unnamed girl is returned to William Jarvis. William Jarvis died in 1817. This was the same year that his son Samuel was in a duel, and there'll be another story about that later. But Samuel divided the estate and sold the smaller parcels. After that, the house was turned into a restaurant and billiard room, then a school, and then a workshop and home used by Isaac Columbus in 1824. After Isaac left, James Kidd purchased the house in 1832 and turned it into a rooming house. In the same year, Toronto, which at the time was the town of York, had a cholera epidemic. Cholera is a bacterial disease, and it spread quickly from a ship arriving from Ireland to Quebec and on to York. At the time, it was believed it spread through the air, so British officers shot off cannons and sanitation workers burned tar to try to kill the spores in the air. Symptoms of cholera are vomiting, severe diarrhea, dehydration, leg cramps, restlessness, and irritability, and can be fatal within hours. While James Kidd was the owner, several people died from cholera, as well as a few by suicide. James started boarding up the rooms to prevent diseases from spreading. People in the town started to think peculiar and creepy things were happening in this house. Cholera causes sunken eyes, dry mouth, shriveled, dehydrated skin, and a pale, milky-looking diarrhea. They definitely would have looked scary before and after death at this corner. After these deaths, the house had a reputation for being haunted. One dark night, James Kidd hears noises from one of the boarded-up rooms that used to be William Jarvis's office. As James pries open the boarded room, the noises stop. A few days later, James has a guest named Baxter, and James has him stay in the haunted room overnight. It was recorded that sounds of fury and noises never heard on the earth were heard from the haunted room. The next morning, Mr. Baxter told James, "I will never pass another night in that room, let alone in this house. Good day." Some people believed it could be the ghost of John Rideout, who was shot and killed in a duel by William Jarvis's son Samuel. The Rideout family had an estate next door, and both families had private burial grounds in their backyards. By 1842, the house was believed to be haunted when James Kidd sold it to Paul Bishop. Paul Bishop's real name was Levesque, and it was anglicized, Levesque meaning bishop. Paul Bishop was a skilled blacksmith, locksmith, and wheelmaker mechanic. His workshop was across the street from the Jarvis house at the northeast corner. Just before obtaining Jarvis House in 1837, he had been hired by Thornton and Lucy Blackburn to build them the first horse-drawn taxi in the town of York. They called their taxis the City, and the colors were yellow and red, which the TTC still uses to this day. The home that the Thorntons lived in for over 50 years at Eastern Avenue and Cherry Street was recently found to be a stop on the Underground Railroad. It was in 1848 Paul Bishop tore down the haunted Jarvis house and rebuilds on top of its foundations. What is known as the Paul Bishop House or Paul Bishop Buildings are actually two townhouses, and they survived the Great Fire of 1849. Paul Bishop left town in 1860. Who do you think haunts this spot? Is it the spirits of the people the Jarvises enslaved, Prince and the girl, or John Rideout killed by Samuel Jarvis, William Jarvis's son, in a duel, or the people who died in James Kidd's rooming house from cholera and suicide? Paul Bishop and the Blackburn story redeems the house that sits on a spot that historian Bruce Bell calls Toronto's most haunted street corner. Would you spend the night here? Do you get any creepy vibes? Let us know if you know any more stories about this house. Stay tuned for more videos of haunted locations and ghost stories in Toronto.